Once again, here's Lee Child and Andrew Child. I'm going to jump back to the books for a minute. You both have maintained kind of a parallel between the fictional world and the world we inhabit. In other words, you have some realistic elements, but there's definitely mythical elements in your worlds. And in Reacher's case, there's this invulnerability and a dimension where the bad guys always get what's coming to them. And it's a needed escape for your readers. Now our world faces this existential crisis that has kind of changed all our reality. And we discussed it kind of in the background of some of our other answers. Will that play into your storylines going forward, or is it kind of counterproductive in the Reacher world? Andrew, since you're at least driving the bus here soon.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really see, the current situation really playing in too much, because, Reacher's not just a character for today. Reacher's a timeless character. Reacher's an extension of the whole knight-errant tradition that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I think that is there being a localized problem. Reacher blows in, fixes the problem in a hugely satisfying way, because everybody deep down wants to see right prevail over wrong. There's some sort of psychopath. So, everybody wants to see right prevail over wrong. Everybody has experienced situations in their own life where they're struggling to make right prevail over wrong. So they want their fictional hero to come in and take care of business for them. So really it's that timeless element that I think is the most important, rather than something which we happen to be it's overwhelming us right now, but it's not something that I think should really take over Reacher's universe.
Yeah,
I speak for all three of us when I say thank God before.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously completely agree with that. And anyway, I don't think that the current realities of this year in terms of the pandemic will make it into too many novels, because it's really significant to me that 100 years ago with the 1918 flu,
right,
that really did not show up in fiction at all. I mean, it was a massive global event with tens of millions of people killed around the world, and yet it shows up hardly at all. So that kind of current thing never really works, especially not for Reacher, because the other thing you got to bear in mind is that, somebody reads the Sentinel, maybe there are still people in the world who've never read a Reacher book. So let's say they read the Sentinel and they really like it. So they go back and buy one of the old paperbacks from, let's say, 1999 or 2003 or something like that. They don't want the current issues of 2003 because it's old, it's boring. You just can't do that. I think what we can do, though, is look at character types and personalities. And 3 years ago, I think it was, I did a book called, no, it must be more than that, called Past Tense, which is a prequel novel. Reacher's still in the army. He's deployed to Hamburg on this secret mission. And in Hamburg, he meets a horrible fat guy who is trying to set up some kind of radical right-wing party. And he says, we have to make Germany great again. And so Reacher has a short discussion with him, then shoots him in the head. And that was, I mean, that was drawn from current affairs. It was it must have been 2015 I was writing that book, because it was taken from the last primary campaign. And so I think you can pick up on moods and currents in terms of personality, but in terms of what is actually going down, I think that's an anchor that you're tying yourself to. And maybe that book would be popular this year, but it won't be popular any other year.
Great point.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think people want to come back to 2020.
I don't.
Screw it. Leave it where it is. But Lee, Reacher walks up. He walks a fine line between rough-hewn justice and savage violence during his quest for retribution. Is there some formula you use to get it right? And do you ever wonder if you've gone maybe too far and you might turn off your readers?
Yeah, no, not really. I think that On the face of it, that's a concern, yeah, and you should, and in a way, I should worry about it, but I don't, because I trust the reader. I mean, not just my readers, obviously, but any reader of fiction understands that this is not reality, and at some level in their brain, deep down, that they kind of understand why they are enjoying the book. So that you got to, you know, let's say you've got a guy who's reading a book and they're probably really civilized, really nice, because most readers are, you know, by definition, readers are the most thoughtful and intelligent among us. So they know perfectly well that we shouldn't do that kind of thing, that we should have proper procedure, due process, rights for everybody concerned, fair trials. They totally understand that. And they believe in it, and that's how they want real life to proceed. But they understand that a book is not real life. A book is a kind of a pressure safety valve, where the reality of the legal system, even though we believe in it, we support it, all that good stuff, it is frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
And it is just annoying that some egregious bad guy is going to get his day in court and maybe even get off on a technicality or something like that, or get a reduced sentence or something.
Right. Yeah.
People know that that is the cost of civilization, but they are fed up about it and frustrated about it. So they turn to fiction for an alternative reality. And in my mind, the very fact that they enjoy it in the book demonstrates that they know they should not have it in real life. So that I'm completely relaxed about it. I think people understand the final scene where Reacher shoots him in the head is a metaphor. You know, it's a metaphor for justice being done, things being taken care of. And I think they understand from an author's point of view, it means that you don't have to write 2 books, because think about it. First of all, Reacher tracks the guy down and eventually finds him. Then I would have to write another book, the legal thriller.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
So the end scene is, I think, always metaphorical. I'm actually always seen that way. Nobody is taking these books as textbooks on how we should live.
Yeah.
Lee, I got to tell you, I've spent 20 years in law enforcement. There would be a warrant out for Reacher. We'd be looking for him.
Yeah, I know. I mean, at one of the fan conventions, actually, they put Reacher on trial. You know, there's a lot of writers who are cops, or a lot of writers who are lawyers, and so they all got together and put Reacher on trial. And of course, he was absolutely guilty as hell. But we got off on jury nullification. They would not convict him.
That's hilarious.
That's awesome.
I love it.
Hey, Andrew, Reacher has slayed a lot of dragons in the last quarter century, and now you're a part of this. Do you have like a mental stack of ideas of antagonists and wrongs to write, or is this going to be one idea at a time?
Yeah, I mean, one idea at a time, I think. I mean, every now and again, I will come across something and I'll think, hey, this would be a great setup for a Reacher book. You know, a bit like the Sentinel in a way, because I was reading about some town that had been on the receiving end of a ransomware attack. And I just thought, wow, that would be really, you know, imagine Reacher in that situation. He wanders into town, everything's locked down, everybody's acting weird. You've got to find out why that is. He's going to be out of his depth with the technical stuff. So he's going to have to figure that out. And then, you know, I think what you're looking for is an environment that's sort of fertile for, you know, the what ifs, you know, what would happen in that situation, what would happen in that situation. So what I'm almost trying not to think too hard. You know, I've heard of some people who will, you know, write down on slips of paper, you know, bits and pieces of ideas and scenarios and put them in a box, and then, you know, they'll pull out 3 and say, right, this is what we're going to do for this book. And you know, I think that I want to try to continue what Lee did so well, which was making it seem fresh and exciting, because it isn't just a regurgitation of ideas that have been sitting around for too long. It's new and it's fresh and it's exciting because it's exciting to us too. So, if I come across scenarios or topics or themes, sure, I'll try to, squirrel them away and let them develop. But aside from that, I want to keep it as fresh and as realistic as possible.
But I know that he will do exactly what I've always done. Is the bad guys are always modeled on people that have annoyed us. And there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction in that. I mean, especially in the earlier books, I actually use their names, and sometimes I would use their exact physical description.
Oh no!
Based on what we call in the legal world is the small dick defense. Nobody's going to get up in court and say, that lying, cheating, backstabbing weasel on page 100? That's me.
You bastards.
I love it.
The small dick offense. Yeah, that's me. Come on.
Oh.
Andrew, what specific qualities of Reacher and the stories your brothers created drew you in as a reader? Like what, if you could explain the essence of what like really grabbed you besides it being your brother writing a brilliant book, let us know what that is.
I think the thing that really speaks to me the most is just his self-reliance. Like I was saying before, I was, the environment I grew up in, I was forced to be self-reliant, and I still am. I always like to do stuff for myself, and you see that in Reacher. Reacher doesn't get in trouble and run crying for help. Reacher takes care of it himself. So I love his self-reliance, and I love the way that he works out puzzles. I love the way that he can look at evidence, look at things that are presented to the reader in plain sight, and he can put them together in a way that perhaps other people don't initially. Think of the start of Persuader, for example, where it appears that Reacher has gone bad and he's shot a cop and he's kidnapping, and it turns out, of course, that that's not the case at all. But, as the facts are laid out in a particular way, you're drawn to a conclusion. But Reacher, of course, reaches a different one and is doing something completely different and completely, satisfying in what he does. So I think that the second most enjoyable thing is the way that he, the kind of the detective side of him, that comes from his years in the military police. And then I think finally, I love all his little interesting quirks. His obsession with prime numbers, and his obsession with, he's because again, I mean, if I'm honest, I'm extremely pedantic. And I forget which book it was now, but I remember Reacher being all mad about somebody describing something as a spiral staircase on account of a spiral being a two-dimensional shape, and going on this whole riff about how it ought to be a helical staircase because a helix is the three-dimensional version. And I just love things like that because I'm always finding myself going down those kind of ridiculous mental rabbit holes in real life. So I think I'd combine those as the things that really draw me to Reacher.
Huh. As an aside, Persuader is the book that before Reacher became a household name outside of this, the thriller writer audience, the book I always used to loan out was Persuader, because I always wanted them to start out thinking that Reacher was the bad guy. And I wanted them to be surprised by that. So I'd give them that, and then I'd say, okay, now I'll read The Killing Floor,
Yeah, I mean, we have a procedural problem in as much as both Andrew and I and Reacher sincerely believe that any situation, there are two ways to deal with it: my way or the wrong way. And so that as long as we can agree on what's right and wrong, we're okay. But I dread the day where we seriously dispute it, because that's going to produce an explosion sufficient to probably power the world, I should think.
Andrew, do you have a favorite book among the 24 outside of The Killing Floor? I'm taking that off the table.
Yeah, I mean, because that's an obvious one, for the reasons we talked about before. I've got a real affection to that. But I think, I mean, I love I love all of them. It's very, very hard to pick. But I think if I was forced to pick one, Persuader, as you mentioned, would be a very, very strong contender. But actually, I think I would pick Make Me, because I think that it has all of the characteristics, or I was talking about what I liked about Reacher, the character, but in terms of a Reacher book, it has all of the ingredients that we know and love. The suspense, the intrigue, the colossal scenes of violence, the great characters, the small town atmosphere. But I think that one of the things that's sort of underrated in Lee's books, one of the things that people, particularly when you hear some of the, the literary critical types talking about, genre fiction, they'll say, oh yeah, something like a Lee Child book, oh yeah, you tear through it, you can't put it down, well, why is that? That is because
like that's a bad thing.
That's because the language grabs you at the beginning and it propels you through to the end. The sentence structure is not a coincidence. The words aren't arranged in some kind of random order. It's done deliberately for the effect that it produces. And I think that in Make Me, the quality of that sort of the lyrical element of some of the writing is at an even higher level than in the other books. So that's the one I would pick.
Nice.
Of those 24 books, Lee, there's been 100 million sold, and it's one every 13 seconds. Is that a true fact?
Well, not anymore. I mean, this sounds horrible, but we gave up counting.
That's not horrible. That's awesome.
It's a good problem.
It passed that 100 million many years ago, and now it could be 200. I mean, all we do now is we weigh the money. And that's the best way of finding out.
How many wheelbarrows is that, Lee? How many wheelbarrows?
But and the whole point of this podcast, Andrew and me, is that how unpredictable everything is. Because I was broke out of work when I wrote that first book. Andrew read it, as he said, hoping that it wasn't crap. And he would have told me if it was. And, from those beginnings where you're desperately hoping to maybe get through a year or two before you got to get another job, now we're in the position that we're in with kind of the opposite problem, that it's a juggernaut that cannot be stopped now. So I'm really grateful to Andrew more than anything else for continuing it. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm interested to hear about those favorites. Persuader I liked, but my personal favorite for me, I think, is probably Gone Tomorrow, because that was I almost never do any research, but I had some accidental research for that book that I was, in the early days of the internet, I ignored it completely. I was a late adopter, and by about, I guess, 2004 or something like that, or 2005, I would be surfing the net, and you know how that is. You go down one rabbit hole after another. And I found myself in this chat room for London policemen. And it was the summer of 2005. And in July 2005 in London, there'd been a terrorist bombing of several transportation, a bus and some subways. And in Britain, they called it 7/7 because it was the 7th of July. And very, very shortly after, within a day or two, the counterintelligence police followed this dark-skinned guy who was acting very oddly, who took a bus east and then jumped off and took another bus back west, and then ran down into the subway station and got on a subway train. And the police followed him all the way down, and he wouldn't respond. So they shot him dead. And it turned out that he was a completely innocent guy. He was, in fact, an electrician from Brazil working in London, nothing to do with anything. And the cops in this chat room were all hiding behind screen names so they could talk freely. And they were very upset about it. something like that upsets professional law enforcement. They don't like to shoot random people for no reason. They were genuinely upset, and the whole days and days of discussion, how did this happen? How did this happen? And the answer came out, it was the list. And I thought, you know, what list? So then my task was to pursue through the internet until I knew what they were talking about. And I found it. I found this so-called list actually on a police department website out of Minnesota. And it was a list that had been developed by Israeli counterintelligence, a list of 11 physical markers of a suicide bomber about to go into action. Oof. And having read this list, it was just fabulous, you know, real world observations. It was just great. So I thought, wow, that is definitely the start of a book. And so I got about 5 chapters out of this list. Reacher sees this woman on a subway train at 2 a.m, and every single thing is ringing a bell about the Israeli list. And the problem with that was it gave me like 5 fabulous chapters at the beginning, and then the question was, now what? I had the whole rest of the book to write, but it came out just great. And for me, it was the perfect example of pushing Reacher right to the edge of cartoonism, but not letting him fall over. And so probably that's the book I was most satisfied with.
Well, I've actually got that training.
What I liked about that book, and if you remember, Lee, right when you were starting to write that book, you came to visit. You remember my daughter was talking about how at school they'd done a writing class. And so you said, okay, so what did they tell you about writing stories? So she said, well, they said you had to have a good character and a bad character, and you had to have some conflict, and then you had to have a resolution. So Lee said, oh, okay then, and what did you call your bad character? And Katie said, I called her Lila Hoth. So Lee said, right, I'm stealing that.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
That is true. You know, absolutely. Katie was, you know, young and wide-eyed and innocent, and I love that prescription of a good character and a bad character that are in conflict. I mean, that's what a story is. And I love the name Lila Hoth, but that was an exact illustration of how it worked, because when I started out, you know, I introduced Lila Hoth as a character, and for many, many scenes, you know, probably up to about 40% of the way through the book, I thought she was going to be a good character and be the love interest, probably. But then I just thought, you know what? No, let's make her the bad character. And it came out really well. So I owe Katie for that name. Of course, I won't pay her. And funnily enough, we were talking about Persuader before with the trick opening. You know, I would say that's a homage. Some people would say it's stolen from Alistair MacLean, a book called Fear is the Key, which, you know, had a similar trick at the beginning. So it just shows you that all the stories have kind of already been told, and all we can do is retell them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But well, hold on, Michael. I want to just follow up with you know, the money aside, the wheelbarrow's full of money, but what do you think is your greatest literary achievement?
Well, you know, I'm like Andrew, I'm fantastically pedantic, and literary means a story put together on the page with words. That's all it means.
Sure.
You know, made up of words. And so any novel is literary in that sense. But in terms of skill and efficacy, I think I got better through the 24. I think for me personally, it falls into 2 sections, where possibly the first 7 or 8, I'm really satisfied with them, very happy with them, but there's something in the first 8 that was superfluous. You know, for instance, just as a trivial example, the third book called Tripwire, the bad guy is maimed. He has a hook for a hand, and his face is burned from a battle incident in Vietnam. And I thought ultimately the face being burned was superfluous. The hook for the hand was enough. There was always one extra thing that could have been taken out in the first 7 or 8 books. And then after that, I got better at it so that it's all much more focused and there isn't anything superfluous. But in terms of literary style, I think, yeah, I mean, I would be happy to endorse Make Me as that. I remember writing that book and feeling, because there is a particular thing when you're writing that if you're very, very lucky, you write a sentence or even a phrase or even a combination of words, and they are so good that you just get a kind of wave of euphoria. You think, yeah, that really works. And, you know, not often, I wouldn't claim, probably 6 or 10 times in my life has that happened, which, by the way, is what makes me sick about Shakespeare. That guy, it was happening to him 6 or 10 times an hour. But yeah, Make Me's got a lot of good stuff in it, plus a truly horrific reveal at the end as to what is actually going on. That was pretty hardcore. I mean, almost sick, but it just remained on the right side of it.
Well, let me ask you a little more personal then. With the opportunity to live anywhere you want or choose, how does 2 lads from England end up in the least populated state in the United States? What's the draw out of the American West for both of you then? And Andrew, I'll start with you.
Well, you know, it's something that's very hard to describe. It's something that you almost have to feel, because often, you know, before we moved to Wyoming, I lived in Chicago. And, you know, everyone in the UK has heard of Chicago. Sure. No one in the UK has heard of where we live in Wyoming. Yeah. So when I would tell people we were moving, they'd all say, "Are you insane?" So actually, one guy, a good friend of mine, the first morning we'd moved to Wyoming, I was sitting out on my deck having my breakfast, and I got a text from him saying, "What on earth are you doing? Why did you move to Wyoming?" So, you know, remembering that old adage about a picture being worth 1,000 words, I just stood up and I took my phone and I just took a video, like a sort of 180-degree video off the side of my deck. And you can see no other houses whatsoever. You can see lots of trees. You can see this huge sky. So I sent that to him. And then he just immediately replied and said, "Okay, now I understand." Because, you know, in the UK, it's as if, you know, it's so, you know, the United Kingdom physically is smaller than the state of Wyoming. Yeah. And the population is the population of Wyoming is the same as, you know, a fairly small city in the UK. And so when you're in the UK, I have this sort of psychological sense of always being like kind of squashed, you know, always being a little bit crushed in. You feel like your shoulders are hunched and, you know, there's just too many people and too much going on. Whereas here, it's as if you can feel that weight lifting off you. You feel relaxed, you feel calm, you feel just kind of in tune with your surroundings much more. And it's not just the physical beauty of the place, because it is phenomenally beautiful, but it's that feeling of calmness and serenity that I haven't ever felt anywhere else. And that's really what attracted me here.
Yeah, you get that when you don't live on top of each other. Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Lee, how about you? I mean, here's an opportunity to go anywhere. Do you end up in Wyoming?
Well, I mean, the liberty to go anywhere is obviously a lovely thing, but it's also quite confounding because, you know, most of the time for most people, you live where you got to live. And if you have a choice, it becomes, it can be difficult and confusing. And I've ended up with way too many places to live. I got a place in France, got a place in England, I got a place in New York, I got a house in Colorado and a place in Wyoming. But yeah, what Andrew says, I mean, I spend most of my time either Wyoming or New York, and typically I'll be in Wyoming for 2 to 3 months, let's say.
Hmm.
I go back to New York, and I usually arrive late-ish in the evening because of the way the flights are.
Yeah.
So, and I'll think, oh, I need coffee and something for breakfast. So at midnight, I'll walk to the grocery to pick up breakfast. And in that one block at midnight, I'll see more people than I've seen in the previous 2 months.
Yeah.
It's simply that the isolation, and you know, Wyoming is a regrettably Republican state, and they all fancy themselves as rugged, self-reliant people, which they absolutely are. And in a way, I mean, why rugged and self-reliant people should be Republicans, I don't know, or should imagine themselves Republicans. But I do like that, you know, there's no fussing. You just leave each other alone unless somebody needs help, in which case you band together. You know, to me, that's the ideal liberal society. I don't know why they see that as Republican. But yeah, it's the lack of pressure, the lack of people, the extreme isolation. I mean, it is extremely isolated. We have to drive almost 10 miles before we see a paved road. We got to drive 10 miles to pick up our mail at the mailbox. It's isolated in a way that is dramatic for a European person, you know, beyond belief in a way.
Yeah.
And yet, I think this is also true for Andrew, but I felt immediately at home there. And I couldn't really figure that out until I realized that, you know, when you're growing up in Britain and watching television, the television from the US is either, you know, slick urban comedies out of New York or LA, or it's Westerns. And so we kind of grew up with the Wyoming environment imprinted on our brains because we saw it so often in cowboy movies.
Yeah.
And it really looks like that. You know, you feel right at home. You're just waiting for the music to start on the phone.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stick with the geography thing. Lee, I've lived in America my entire life and traveled through a good amount of the states and consider myself fairly observant. You're a native Brit, and yet you seem to know more about small towns than just about any corner of this country than anybody I've ever seen. How do you go about choosing these settings? And when you travel, do you just stay off the beaten path and never go to the big cities? Or, I mean, it's kind of humbling how much you have encyclopedic knowledge of the small town America.
Well, part of that is not true, but part of it is true. And, you know, I've been, it is now, what is it, more than 46 years since I first came to the US. Because in college, I married an American woman. And so every vacation, you know, every family trip would be to the US. And we traveled a lot extensively. And of course, because we were poor, you know, we're out. Jane had a sister in Chicago, for instance, so rather than fly to Chicago, which we couldn't afford, we'd either borrow my in-law's car and drive, or we'd take the train or whatever. And so, yeah, you know, by the time I finally emigrated, which was 1998, 24 years after my first visit, part of the immigration thing is that you have to list all your previous visits, because I guess technically what they want to do is check back through police records that you're not a felon or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I had to dig out my old passports, and I went through, and in 24 years, I'd had exactly 100 visits.
Oh, geez.
That's awesome.
And then, you know, lived here since 98. And yeah, you know, it's, being an immigrant is, first of all, you have no intrinsic loyalty to any one particular place. You know, you don't have a birthplace in the US. There is not a city where you went to school. There is not a region where you went to college. It's all equal. And so you tend to look at it in a much more unified way. And your fascination and your curiosity is engaged. It's not where you've lived all your life. It's not what you used to. And I believe that the outsider has a far more perceptive view. And and of course, with again, just fun and vacation and work, I've traveled extensively. And it's interesting to me, you know, people don't want to hear opinions from somebody who's not American born. And I say, well, listen, I bet I have been to more places than you've been to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I bet I have talked to more Americans than you have. And I've certainly listened to more Americans than you have. And I remember once being criticized by some guy who, in his senior year at some college, you know, head of young Republicans in some college, he was criticizing me. And I said, listen, kid, I've been in America longer than you have. And none of those years was spent wearing diapers and learning to talk.
Brilliant. I love
Checkmate.
it. Yes,
Andrew, what about you? Is there a certain locale? I know you said that you don't think about the next book till the next book, but is there a certain locale or region of the country that you're itching to incorporate in the Reacher saga?
Well, for me, you know, not to be pretentious about it, but it's like a composer might approach a piece of music. The first thing you got to decide is the key. You know, are you going to write in G major, which is a sort of cheerful, happy-go-lucky key, or are you going to do E flat minor, which is a sort of sad or bluesy sort of key? So I usually had in my mind the feel that I wanted, and then it's just retrospectively something from that mental database will pop up. You know, we were talking about Persuader, and I wanted a kind of cold, hard, gray feel for that book. And so I'd been to the coast of Maine, you know, that rocky granite coast, cold, rather stormy sea. And I thought, you know, I'd been there years before, but I thought, yeah, that is exactly the place that this book needs to be set. So it's kind of getting the feel first, and then some place or some experience that you've had will pop up and fit the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how I see it. I think the key word is retrospect, because I know a lot of people will say, okay, I want to set a book in Charleston, so I will go to Charleston and see what it's like so that I can describe it accurately. I never do that. What I do is everywhere I go, I just keep an open mind, and, you know, you observe things, you remember things, and then later on, when you're thinking about the story that you want to tell, you know, as Lee said, you know the kind of place that you need for it, you know the atmosphere that is required. So then something will pop out from your memory that says, oh yeah, when I was, you know, I remember one book I was writing, I remember thinking, maybe I'm not doing this right, because my wife was writing a book that was set in Venice. So she went to Venice to do some research, and I ended up writing a big scene that was set in Gary, Indiana. And I remember thinking,
the Horseshoe Casino, you're good. Don't worry.
Maybe she's a little smarter at this than me. But no, it's all about, because I had happened to be in Gary, Indiana some previous time, and I needed a scene that was, you know, super gritty and urban, and, you know, lots of disused or potentially disused warehouses and so on. So, you know, it just popped out in my head. Yeah, I've been somewhere like that. It was here. So, you know, again, I think it's part of that method of not over planning. It's about making sure that the key is right, and then building back from there.
Yeah.
Well, for the record, I live in Kokomo, Indiana, but this is nothing like Gary. Actually, Chicago is closer to Gary for those people at home who are geographically challenged.
Reacher mentions Gary, Indiana at one point in one of the books. He's mentally, idly plotting a trip. He's going to go from here to here, and he thinks he'll pass through Gary, Indiana. And he said, I've seen worse places, but not many, and most of them.
And that's true. By the way, I was thrilled when I bought one shot and realized, hey, Reacher's finally in Indiana. But gentlemen, you have actually reached the end of the regular portion of this interview. You've survived
Congratulations.
the main portion.
What comes now then?
However, we have what's called the lightning round, which is, as we like to describe it, our moms we grew up with moms that say, think before you speak. This is the portion where you can think or you not, or you just speak, off the cuff, whatever. You don't have to put a lot of thought into these.
Don't put thought into it, please.
We didn't put any thought into the questions, so.
And that's exactly. Since I'm the host, I will begin, and there will be 3 questions, and I will direct them at each of you. We'll go with Andrew first, since he's the youngster, like myself. What is the one skill or talent that your brother has that you wish you did?
I'd have to say writing.
Oh, come on.
He is
outside
Lee
the
Child.
box, Andrew.
No, he is Lee
When
Child.
you
Come
tried
on.
to lose your job.
What about his prodigious dope smoking capability? That's probably something.
There you go. See, now we're talking Colorado right now.
What is he smoking right now?
The poison pen the other night with the interview.
Yeah.
All right, Lee, I will direct the same question at you. What skill or talent does your brother have that you wish you had?
He can deal with the world better than I can deal with. If there's some stupid bureaucratic problem or something like that, I usually have I'm incandescent with rage for 24 hours and then ignore it until, I get sued or somebody takes me to court. Whereas he calls the person, and you should watch this actually. He calls the person, and with that very charming British accent and very calm voice, he tells them exactly what they're going to do, exactly when they're going to do it, and how grateful they're going to be for having done it. And about 35 minutes later, his problem is solved.
Wow.
Are you sure he's not Italian?
Yeah.
No, because he said polite, Chris. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
All right, question number 2, and we'll start with Lee this time. You are forced, or you decide, doesn't matter, to write a book under a pseudonym, and it cannot be a thriller. What genre do you explore?
I would do romantic suspense.
Romantic suspense. I can see that. There's elements in Reacher that you can see that you can do.
I believe Reacher is a romance series.
I agree. Andrew.
Oh, that's a tough one. Part of the problem is if you grow up loving to read, you read so many different kinds of books that, pretty much any of them would be fun. But I think I'd quite like to write a children's book, honestly.
Oh, really? Cool.
There you go.
Yeah, that was something that we, when he was a kid and I was older, we loved the children's books. We had so many favorites. If I was visiting, I would read to him at bedtime, and it was great. I still remember those books with great affection.
That's nice. I like that.
Okay, my 3rd and last question is, what is the most, and let's see who's up first. Andrew, what is the most absurd or bizarre critique one of your books has received?
I think I'd have to go to, I remember for my first book, I got a 1-star review on Amazon because the guy said that when the book was delivered, the postman left it outside and it rained.
Your fault.
Damn you, Andrew.
Damn authors.
Your fault.
Curses, Andrew. All right, Lee, what about you? You probably had a few.
The one that I remember most vividly was an Amazon review of Persuader, as a matter of fact. And the woman said, I hated this book. I'm sorry I read it. I wish I could unread it.
I don't want to meet that woman.
Mom.
Brutal.
All right, Chris, you are up, sir.
All right, so 3 questions. Lee, what's the one thing you are looking forward to doing in retirement?
Reading. That is the only thing I've ever resented about being a writer, is that the hours that you spend at the keyboard is taken away from reading other people.
Anybody in particular?
Everybody. Especially new authors. I live for, I do a lot of blurbing of new authors, and people think that's because I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
It is absolutely not. It's because I just love the newness, the freshness, the passion, the energy in first books. I'm addicted to it.
I'll have to give
I got to interject real quick. the fact that you're not reading as much blows my mind, because every time I see blurbs, I'm like, holy shit, this friggin' Lee Child reads everybody.
Yeah,
It's really impressive how much you can read.
I've always been a very fast reader. I typically read a book a day, and you know, at least over 300 books a year, and I love it. And you know, when you're writing, that's hours and hours that you're not reading, and so that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yep. All right. Well, Andrew, brother rivalries can often turn violent. I know this from personal experience. So let's say, as the younger brother, let's say your relationship with Lee turned violent. What weakness or injury of his would you exploit and use to your advantage?
Well, I guess I'd probably just, exploit the fact that, I'm so many years younger, so I could probably just keep running for longer and he wouldn't be able to catch me.
Hey, Lee, what would you use against Andrew?
Oh, you know,
do you have bad knees or a shoulder?
I just think that deep down, Andrew is a nice guy, and that's what I would use against him, because my motto has always been, whoever you are, I am smarter than you. Whoever you are, I am nastier than you. And I would lull him into a sense of false security or something like that, and then shiv him in the back or something.
Shiv him. Yeah, all right. Beauty. That's getting dangerous. All right. So, Lee, let me ask you. You co-authored The Sentinel, right? But will you blurb the next Reacher book you do not co-author?
Will I blurb the next Reacher book?
Yes.
I think it would lack credibility. So probably not. I mean, actually, I'm really interested to see how that turns out. You know, as you can see at the moment, they got both our names on there. And what are they going to do when the transition is complete? I assume they're going to make it possessive at the top. Lee Child's Jack Reacher, by Andrew. So that's endorsement enough, I guess.
Read this book, Lee Child. Well, I'm on the title, so don't worry about it.
Read this book. I know where you live.
Well, Mike. Okay, with that in mind then, and I'm an older brother too, Lee, so I kind of get this. If you are going to endorse or consider endorsing his first full-fledged novel without your involvement there, have you devised a method of torture to make him earn your book blurb once he finally takes over?
Writing the book is torture enough. That is what people don't understand. There are so many damn words in a book, and they've all got to be the right ones, and they've all got to be in the right order.
Yep.
And that is, it's a huge achievement, to get through it. And so I would assume that the punishment has already happened, in actually writing the thing.
All right, Andrew, what are you not willing to do to get that book blurb?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Probably the worst thing that could happen would be if we were forced into a coffee drinking competition or something like that, because we'd probably end up drinking so much neither of us slept for a year afterwards.
All right. Okay. Let's start. Well, this is for both of you, so we'll just do this kind of thought process here. Have either of you gone into a small town Western restaurant and tried ordering spotted dick?
They still have their teeth, so I think you're okay.
Well, I still got some on my teeth. I love small town restaurants. I absolutely love them. Yeah. And I was in one. Can't remember when, a few years ago in Du Bois, Wyoming, and it was just the most fabulous place. And I had whatever, I look around to see what other people are having and order the same thing, because I figure it's probably the best dish. But the thing I remember about that restaurant, Du Bois is like a really sweet little town, and it still has the wooden sidewalks.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody had carved a bunch of names into, with a hot poker into the wooden sidewalk. And the first name was Shorty Fleck. And just exactly like when I heard Andrew's daughter Katie say Lila Hoth, I thought Shorty Fleck is definitely a character. So he showed up in one of the books.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've never ordered Spotted Dick, but I remember once, a few years ago, I was invited to a book event in Birmingham, Alabama, and we were staying in a hotel. So I came down for breakfast, and I was looking at all this food that, some of it I recognized, some of it I didn't. And there was this kind of giant vat of this kind of pale, creamy liquid people were pouring on their breakfasts. And I looked at it and I certainly didn't recognize it. So I said there was a guy there helping himself. And it was in a sort of busy hotel restaurant. So this sort of big murmur of background conversation. It's quite noisy. So I said to this guy, "Excuse me, could you tell me what that is, please?" And this hush broke out throughout the entire room. Like that scene in American Werewolf in London, where the American tourists go into the pub in Yorkshire. It's a bit like that. This sort of silence broke out, and the guy looked at me because it was gravy, but in England, gravy's not pale and creamy; it's dark and. And I had no idea. And certainly you don't have gravy at breakfast in England. So I was just confused. But everyone was looking at me, if it had been during the Cold War, they'd have assumed I was a Soviet.
Kill him.
that line in My Cousin Vinny, what is it, grit?
What is a grit? Exactly. All right, let's start. Let's stir up the hornet's nest a little bit here, boys. Andrew, finish this sentence. I am better than my brother at what?
Sleeping.
Sleeping, all right.
Come on.
Let's hear it, Lee.
Smoking. I'm lifelong dedicated. Andrew quit early.
He's just a quitter.
Quitter.
What's in that pipe, Lee? What's in that pipe?
Yeah. Well, here's the pipe. Since we're in Colorado.
Yeah, he is in Colorado, so we're good.
There you go, brother. There you go.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a thrill and an honor and a pleasure, all three of those things combined, to have you guys on tonight.
Absolutely.
We are really excited about the Sentinel. We are so glad that Reacher is going to be continuing his life as a reader from the get-go. I'm really glad that you, Lee, that you made the decision you did. And Andrew, kudos to you for taking it on. But we want to thank you guys for being so generous with your time and for coming on the show tonight.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
I want to thank Lee Child and Andrew Child for coming on tonight to talk about all things Jack Reacher and their great new novel, The Sentinel. Join us every Monday for another great episode of the Crew Reviews.
That's something I can drink to.
Cheers.
Cheers. And this is Sean, and he's got Sasquatch on the mind. And game.
What a fantastic interview with the Child brothers. Join us next Monday for another great episode of the Crew Reviews. What? I don't know. Ball game, really.
Channeling.
Many things, right? I left a big space there.
He was channeling Shatner.
What was happening in your brain?
Next
I
Monday.
do. Mike, that's a great call. I had a William Shatner next week for another great episode.
Well, he was the #1 guy for the lead child character, right?
I think that's a lie. That can't be true.
That's beautiful. And this is take 2 of the Sasquatch Boys. Ready? Yeah.
Tonight was a great.
Sure was. Whatever you meant. Cut.
It was great.
And
take 4.
print. Ready? Yeah.
Tonight was a fantastic interview with the Child brothers.
Sure was.
It was.
Mhm.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
any suggestions on what I should say?
Right. Ready?
Go.
And go.
What an incredible interview with two incredible brothers, Lee and Andrew Child. Join us every Monday for interviews that are almost as good as this.
Oh, come on, dude. Mike's got to go.
You were doing good.
This is great. Next week, yeah, it's okay. We're good.
We did better.
It's only 11:15.
Maybe can Sasquatch come in and do this one? All right, here we go. And geek.
What a tremendous discussion with the Child brothers, Lee and Andrew Child. It's about the. I need some what was the
Alpo?
dish I had you guys thought was Alpha?
Yeah, Alpo.
Or what was
Have
that?
you
Lee's
been drinking?
pipe?
Have
No,
you
I
been
mean,
drinking?
that's not the problem.
All right.
Well, all right.
And
Take a deep breath. Wait.
labor breath. And geek.
What a tremendous interview with Lee and Andrew Child about the Sentinel and their.
I like that intro though. I liked that part. That was good.
I need some guidance here.
Just do it.
I have read every Lee Child book, and
I'm 6'5" and 250.
dude,
Jack Reacher is 6'5" and 250.
therefore we had this interview. Thank you.
Good night.
As if my editing life wasn't busy enough. And here we go. All right, focus. Sasquatch. Ready and geek.